People who had sex with a celebrity. How was it? Story 1. She's currently a national-level news journalist on TV. This was while she was still a cadet. After she got hers, she literally rolled over and fell asleep. Woke up the next morning to her in my shorts and a t-shirt she took from my wardrobe. Danced her way out of my place to a cab. Literally danced. While still wearing my clothes. Later on, one of her friends was knocking on my door. Apparently, the dress she wore was borrowed, so she sent her friend over to collect it. I handed it over, along with the shoes and underwear. Her friend asked what she was supposed to do with those, and I kinda said it was a package deal as I'm not that guy that would keep those as trophies. Only saw her once again in the nightlife district of my city. She was stealing a street sign. Then, years later, she's on the news almost every night. Story 2. I matched with a woman who was a top 50 tennis player on Tinder while I was at a conference. I figured it was a bot or just a scammer, but since they agreed to meet me at the bar across from my hotel, I figured what was the worst that could happen. Chatted for 20 minutes and she agreed to go upstairs. I was a bit intimidated as I am not an athlete, but I proceeded to give her a solidly mediocre 25 minutes of lovin'. She then left and unmatched me. So I guess it was fine. Standard first-time sex with an extra dose of awkwardness from my end where the person was better looking, a lot fitter than I'm used to, but otherwise pretty much the same thing as non-celebrity sex. Story 3. My older brother ditched me trying to hook up with Joan Jett. I was 15 or 16 at the time and she was in town for the Indy 500 or 4th of July. Can't remember which one exactly, but we ran into her and she was extremely nice and talked to us for a couple of hours before she performed. Next thing I know, my brother's friend is giving me a ride home because he had some other plans. Turns out she was just being an actual genuinely nice person, and my brother read that as her hitting on him. Wish I could have been there for the rejection. Grinning squinting face. Story 4. My mom dated Michael Hutchins from INXS when they were both teenagers. She met him at one of their shows when INXS was a small band and she quickly became buddies with them. They would oftentimes pick her up in their van and she'd go to shows with them. After a year or two, my mom moved on from them and they blew up in popularity shortly after she left. She didn't speak to them for years but bumped into Michael at Sydney Airport not long before he died and he remembered her dearly. They shared hugs and caught up for a good while at the airport. My mom claims they were just friends, but we all know the truth. My mom has been tight-lipped about it all, but described him as shy. Story 5. Before the Revivalists got their big break with their pop hit on the radio, I was at a festival in the woods about 10 years ago watching them at a 3 p.m. set. Small crowd. They were jamming and I noticed the guy next to me scowling, standing still with his arms folded. I jokingly attempted to spark a convo about his demeanor as I was boogieing. I nudged him and asked something to the tune of, "Why you so mad, bro?" He responded that he loved this band and it was the reason he came to the festival, and last night he discovered that his girlfriend left his tent and went and blew the lead singer. He was upset but had to get his money's worth even if it meant giving Stank Eye the whole set. Story 6. One of the old ladies in my grandma's dementia ward used to tell this story to anyone who would listen about a time she once gave a handjob to Engelbert Humperdinck backstage at a concert. She was very enthusiastic in her recounting of this story. Take this for what you will. Story 7. She was Slash is a rather famous broadcast personality in the UK. Went out with her for about 6 months in my 20s. Whenever she's on TV and I turn it on with my wife or my parents, I feel really embarrassed somehow and want to turn over but at the same time pretend not to notice. Kind of awkward. Edit. I realize I haven't directly answered the question. The sex was good. She had a few kinks that I thought were somewhat weird, though realized later weren't all that weird really. She was lovely. I really messed things up, but am happy with how things later ended up and am not hung up on her or anything. Although part of why I cringe somehow is imagining how others may expect that I regret no longer being with her. Story 8. Went on a Tinder date with a dude from Yellowcard. He lived on a very tiny houseboat and made pretty terrible beats. He got emotional talking about getting kicked off of American Idol. Came in about 2 minutes. Story 9. Ugh. Unfortunately slept with Adam Levine 13 years ago. It was terrible and cringy. But what was more terrible/cringy was seeing his text leak with that girl last year and knowing I had fucked a man that says things like, "I'm going to need to see the booty." Story 10. My band was on tour in 2010 and we played Spaceland in LA. Kesha was there and was already pretty well known. I had no idea who she was, but we had a friend in common and we all hung out that night. She and I hooked up in my hotel room and it was unmemorable, I'm sure for her, too, as we were both pretty wasted. Left town the next day and we haven't spoken since.